dose of rain,
and
soaking
nitrogen,
it up.
free nitrogen.
That's right.
Yeah, I love the how electric plants look after a rain. You know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the vibrancy, especially if the sun comes out the next day, you're like,
Woo!
oh, it
That's
got
right.
saturated.
Okay. Yep, what a miracle, isn't it?
Truly. My heart has been going out with it to everybody on all the islands who's been really getting hit, though. I've been
Yeah.
seeing some pretty heavy images.
Now he got hit with 14 inches up
14
the
inches.
Haiku area and wiped out the bridge. Yeah, and some houses got lost. 75 million gallon reservoir was spilled over, and it was like a river coming down the road. So lucky it didn't get breached, but
Right.
we're hoping that more rain will that perspective.
Yeah, it wasn't any more intense. I just heard thunder and saw a little flash of lightning.
Yeah, Electric Avenue, huh? All right, Vincent, we'll give it a few minutes here. People are coming on. I can hear the rain.
Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Vincent Kimura. I am the host for tonight's 12th Music and Speaker Series. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. We're excited to have Dr. Zach Bush with Paul Izak, who is a longtime Waimanalo resident, farmer, and music extraordinaire. Real quick for housekeeping items, if you do have questions for either of these individuals, can you please post them in the chat window and post it to everyone. If you have any questions in terms of issues, you can go ahead and chat with the host. Otherwise, we are the Hawaii Farmers Union United, and I'm going to introduce Vincent Mina to take it off.
Well, aloha, everybody, and thank you, Vincent. We have a policy now within Hawaii Farmers Union that unless your name's Vincent, you can't be in the organization. So now Vincent Kimura is the president of our Waimanalo chapter and a brother and a collaborator. And between the both of us, we convinced people about the direction we want to see this all go in. And really, really excited and fortunate that we have Paul Izak and Dr. Zach Bush with us tonight. They were the tandem last year, and I wanted to bring them back because, especially on the heels of Paul Stamets and Micah Nelson, I just felt that these two gentlemen were the next natural presentation to have. And we're going to have a few things. We'll have some information to share with you folks after Paul plays some music. But for right now, I'd like to turn it over to our brother Paul. You know, the beautiful thing about Paul's music is that he's a mahiai, he's a farmer. And not only a farmer at heart, but an actual farmer in his daily gig. And he takes that farming energy and puts it into his music. And it's just such a beautiful synergy. It just feeds off of each other. And then we're the wonderful recipients of all that creativity and amazing food. So Paul and his wife, Kelly, who's a yoga instructor, and they're, 1+1 = 3 with those two. And so really happy to have them in our community. And Paul, please.
Thank you,
Go ahead,
Vince.
brother.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Really excited to team up here with Zach Bush one more time. It's been about a year, and really appreciate what Zach has to share and offer to our communities. So happy to share music alongside his words. But I'll take it to the back roads here. Oh, I'm a farmer in the back roads, yeah. I know the story already been told, and it will be told again by the youngin' who's listening. Let food be thy medicine. Planted nicely and tended gratefully. Let food be thy medicine. Oh yes, yeah. Planted consciously and tended gratefully. Truly a miracle. Watching the garden grow. Don't need no chemical. Use the M&IMO. Truly a miracle. Watching the garden grow. Don't need no chemical. Use the M&IMO. I'm a farmer in the back roads, yeah. I know the story already been told, and it will be told again by the youngin' who's listening. So listen in, child. Let food be thy medicine. Planted consciously and tended gratefully. Let food be thy medicine. Planted consciously, tended so gratefully. Well, I'm gonna roll down the mountain, jump in the water, laugh with the sisters of light. That's right. Live with the meaning, giving and receiving, telling my brothers it's alright to bask in the glory of creation, yes, for this is all we know, to live without hesitation. You give and then you got it, let it go. Oh, ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah. We're singing, ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, 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 hey. Hopefully bring a little sunshine on this next verse. Ooh, 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 into our lives. So when the sun hits the Ko'olau mountain, the blue sky, eternal fountain. Yeah, when the sun hits the Ko'olau mountain, I'm grateful to be living island style. Yeah, when the sun hits the Ko'olau mountain, the blue sky, eternal fountain. Yeah, when the sun hits the Ko'olau mountain, I'm grateful to be living island style. Yes, I am grateful to be living island style. I'm grateful to be living island style. Yes, I am grateful to be living island style.
Yeah, baby.
Grateful
Great,
to be
Paul.
living island style.
And everybody, it's raining outside pretty heavily in Waimanalo. So if you get it, it's breaking up a little bit. That's why. So
It was
it's
breaking
got
up. Yeah, shoots.
a little bit in the beginning, but it sounds really good, Paul. Great.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was wondering about the weather. We're getting that squall, and I hope everybody's safe out there. I know we all got a lot of weather here the last couple days, and it did some damage to some people. So my prayers to everyone who might have felt that from Mama Nature. But let's keep supporting one another through these times, and hopefully these songs can bring some joy to your life. Oh, little thunder in the background. This one is for the plant medicine. I wanted to play one called La'au Lapa'au that is a great tribute to Kumu Lavan Ohai and his great works here on Oahu through UH, I had the opportunity to learn from him, but he is a native of Hawai'i and did a lot of teaching there. So the song is just a tribute to him and the teachings that he passed on to others that are going to continue to be passed on, that ancient wisdom of la'au lapa'au. Wisdom is the absence of foolishness. It comes with each experience. Wisdom, yes, is the absence of foolishness. It comes with each experience. Ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, passed down from generation, yeah. A warm mahalo to the late and your wisdom will early never die. No. He said you wanna learn, then I will teach you how to use the ancient wisdom of la'au lapa'au. A healer's companion in the herbs, yeah. So you must become ma'au with the herbs, and what you do with it is always up to you. Just remember one thing, a kua always guides you through a simple mixture, and you will see it's half your spirit, half the plant energy. Hey, la'au lapa'au, yes, yeah. Hawaiian plant medicine, yeah. La'au lapa'au, hey. It's time we teach our children this year, yes. Ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, passed down from generation, yeah. Well, Kumu Ohai, he came up to a friend and I, smiles and embrace, looked her straight in the face. He said, last night a kua came to me and told me that these are peaceful warriors I see. You will have strength in everything you do. Just keep an open heart and always stay true. Don't cloud your thoughts, don't you cloud your mind. Observe the signs and pule all the time. Put your hands in the land, spirit will grow stronger. Just remember, a kua takes you higher. La'au lapa'au, oh, oh. Hawaiian plant medicine, yes. La'au lapa'au, hey. It's time we teach our children this year, yes. Ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, passed down from generation. Well, I use laukai to mend my wounds. I use the comfrey to mend my bones. I use the knee oil to circulate my blood, yeah. And olena to keep the inflammation down. I use kalika to radiate the mana, and avapui for sickness and for flu. I'm telling you, herbs are our friends, yeah. It's time we practice conscious medicine. I'm telling you, herbs are our friends, yeah. It's time we practice conscious medicine. Hey, la'au lapa'au, yes, yeah. Hawaiian plant medicine, yeah. La'au lapa'au, hey. It's time we teach our children this year, yeah. Ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, ancient wisdom, passed down from generation. Shoo.
Yeehaw!
Yes, it's coming through all right.
Right on, brother. Right on.
Yeah.
You got another
Happy
one
to do
for
it.
us? You got another one
Yeah,
for us?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. I'm coming through all right. I'm not too choppy. I'm gonna turn off my Bluetooth just to make sure. All right. this one reminding us that we're creators in this time, not getting stuck in a consumer-based mentality. When we're in that creative mentality, more things are possible. More energy is given to those with regenerative practices who can help us move forward to get rid of some wasteful practices. So that's where this song came from, inspired by Miss Vandana Shiva, who was traveling the world at the time and happened to make a stop here in Hawaii, and helped inspire this with reminding us to save our seeds and that Mama Nature truly has the patent on life. Hey! We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. Yes, yeah. Oh yeah. You can't patent life, no way. Mama Nature has the rights to the life, no way. Mama Nature has the right to the simple purity. Can't you see? This is a remembrance, a part of the human experience. Feel, be real, and nobody steal our voice or our choice. To be curious and ask questions, confident making decisions that affect our future. Cause we thrive as a culture when we support innovations, focus on renewable energy, regenerative farming along our harm and our environment. Change is the inevitable, something as simple as growing a vegetable makes us a true rebel in this time. One less in the corporate consumer mentality, taking the steps to create our own reality. Just as Gandhi sat at the spinning wheel, he knew to truly deal with conflict. We gotta get back to the simple things and the joy it brings. Peace to the movement, letting love flow through its head. Gotta trust the power in our own hands as creators, being conscious with our actions. Spinning wheel spin, getting again. Simple life always lets you know. Oh, spinning wheel spin, getting again. Simple life always lets you know. Hey, now, yes. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. Yes, yeah. Oh yeah. But I choose not to eat processed foods that's been sprayed with the pesticides made by companies that got a lot to hide, putting farms out of business because they got the patent on the seed, but the greed will never feed us. Now wait, I'd say we gotta get back to the roots, to the natural way. So I will build a garden to show my respect to the miracles of life, the cycles of death. I will do my best to appreciate every breath that I take, as it fills me with the energy to create an even better way every day where we stay. Yeah, we stay in the present state. We can remediate all of the greed and hate and feed the nation through organic creation. Spinning wheel spin, getting again. Simple life always lets you know. Oh, spinning wheel spins again and again. Simple life always lets you know. Oh, through our diversity we will find unity. That's right, yeah. Through our diversity we will find unity. And through our diversity we will find unity. And through our diversity we will find unity. Yes, yes. Cause we are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. We are not consumers, we are creators, breath takers and energy makers. Yes, yes.
Woo! Wow, Paulie, that was really good, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate your music and your, you know, it's just a blessing to have you here as with us tonight, and your music of the Aina is just so inspiring and just always gets me moving, man. So thank you so much, Paul.
Mahalo so much, Vincent. Happy to be here, man.
Love
Thank you
brother.
guys for joining us. Love you.
So, folks, Hawaii Farmers Union United was founded back in 2010. For those of you who don't know, I'll give you just a short history lesson here. This is a picture taken from our convention, our last physical convention that we were able to physically meet in 2019. And we are 13 chapters across the state. We have a regenerative mission. We have a mission that's all about rebuilding our soils and moving from that place as farmers. So we definitely have gotten the attention of the legislature and the imagination of the people here in Hawaii. And it's really a beautiful thing to be a chapter of a national farming organization. You can see the energy here from our convention in 2019 and the smiles on all the people's faces. We had over 55 presentations and 4 educational tents, and we took that same energy and that same intention and put it in our virtual convention this past November, which is available online for those of you who didn't get a chance to make it. And also Micah Nelson curated a 3-hour concert, so you can still get that information and really inexpensive. It would help support our foundation and our educational outreach moving forward. As you can see, some of our presenters that we had at the convention and our musicians that we had during that convention. It was just a wonderful time to meet. We got a chance to build relationship with the likes of Paul Stamets and Joel Salatin and Dr. Elaine Ingham and Micah Nelson and his family, and just helped curate that concert. And it was just a beautiful thing, and really appreciated all the energy and all the support that was put into it. As you can see, all the musicians here that were featured, it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. So I feel that we're coming off of that and starting our speaker series here. Last 2 weeks ago, we had Paul Stamets and Micah Nelson present, and tonight, of course, Paul Izak and Dr. Zach Bush. You know, I wanted to share before introducing Zach to go on. You know, what you see behind me is an initiative that we're bringing forward here within HFUU, and this is a crop called sun hemp. And with this crop, it was grown over 7 feet tall. Bobby Paia from Mauna Kea chapter put in this cover crop of sun hemp. And what we did was we rolled and crimped it with a roller crimper that goes in the front of the tractor. So this way it laid it down to look like and act as a natural weed mat. And the vision is to be able to grow our own cover crop seeds here in Hawaii and start, you know, building our agricultural system that we just don't have here in Hawaii. You know, I've been of the ilk to say that, you know, our agriculture here in Hawaii is like a Lamborghini sitting in the driveway, and we need to just really take it out for an agricultural spin as to what's possible. And I feel through building our soils will be the segue into being able to do that. And so with that, you know, that whole purpose is growing roots deep into the soil, and growing roots deep into the soil creates humic situations that build the ability for carbon to be sequestered into the soil and our aquifers to be charged when you get these rain events. And so, you know, with Dr. Zach Bush's talk tonight, you know, he's going to be talking a lot about carbon. And, you know, carbon's the energy in the soil. The only problem these days is we're throwing it up in the air and we're warming up our oceans with it instead of putting it back in the soil and putting it into our plant life. So we're asserting that within HFUU, that bringing all these agencies together and bringing the private sector together and the public sector and our government to start discussing the importance of soil health, to where we can create some initiatives to further that. I feel that's where we're going to begin in our agricultural systems development moving forward. So I really, you know, I want to introduce Zach with a quote that was on his website, you know, zachbushmd.com. And it's a beautiful quote. I feel it's a really an appropriate way to introduce him. He says, "The knowledge base resting below is a library of insights I've hunted and gathered about the human experience over the years, with the intention for all of us to find synergy in knowledge, passion, and purpose to elevate the trajectory of mankind." And it's a beautiful website. Please go and check it out. And Zach just had a wonderful 3-hour webinar that it was an amazing 3 hours. It went by so fast because Zach, he's a kind of an individual. He's a doctor that has done a deep dive into research that he's really has an amazing knack to connect dots with that research and then present it to community in a way that can best help our best and highest interests. So Zach, thank you so much for being here tonight, brother. Really appreciate you being on again, and take it away, man.
Happy to be with all of you. And I always feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I talk to a group of farmers. You guys know your business better than I do. But Vincent thought it would be worthwhile for me to jump in with some of our most recent thoughts. For those of you who aren't aware, in addition to some of my for-profit work in the space of agricultural innovation and human health innovation, myself and a bunch of colleagues launched the nonprofit, which is Project Biome, a couple of years ago. And our first big project was Farmers Footprint. And that has become kind of globally recognized as a space for all of us to engage in dialogue to advance the public awareness of the importance of regenerative agriculture as a root cause solution for the planet, and not just for things like global warming that we'll speak on a bit today, but also for the existential threats to our species, this recent pandemic being a phenomenal example of it. And one of the things I've spoken about widely in all of my teaching over the last year is the role of carbon particulate in the atmosphere in our respiratory pandemics that we have every single year. So every fall in the third week of November in the Northern Hemisphere, we see the advent of another global pandemic. And so we certainly publicized very thoroughly this recent one globally, and we created some massive changes socioeconomically and politically around the world for those, and we lost a lot of civil liberties during that process. But it turns out that's an annual process that doesn't get talked about necessarily to the same amount that we have this year. But every year in the third week in November, the Northern Hemisphere starts to launch into its respiratory disease season, and we call it flu season, or we call it now coronavirus season. But the reality is it's carbon season. And so carbon starts to really accumulate in our atmosphere during those winter months. And that's a much different narrative than we've heard about the story of carbon. Unfortunately, I believe that the story of carbon was usurped by some well-meaning whistleblowers and scientists in the 1970s and 80s when we first started to realize that we had an existential problem of carbon excess and carbon accumulation in the atmosphere. And the carbon became this flashpoint term, carbon dioxide getting most of the attention. Turns out it's not nearly the most potent greenhouse gas. Methane is far more toxic to the atmosphere than CO2 is, and doesn't have the same respiratory pattern that CO2 has. And so ultimately methane's a much bigger problem, but you don't hear about that either. And so we've boiled down the whole discussion around global warming to the concept of carbon. And you'll notice in the last few years, we dropped the story of carbon dioxide, and now we just call it the carbon problem. And we've created an extraordinary industry of pseudo economies around carbon. And so we now have literally tens of trillions of dollars of government monies being put into this mission of carbon reduction or carbon sequestration through green bonds. And so you've got, Germany alone just announced another like $4 trillion worth of green bonds that they want to invest in green technologies that will reduce carbon emissions. And the whole phenomenon of carbon credits has exploded. And so now we see businesses like solar companies tapping in to get solar credits for big companies like Nestle and Dow Chemical to buy up those carbon credits to offset their behavior. And so instead of changing their toxic behaviors on the planet, they simply are now buying up credits from the solar companies in the voice of reducing carbon footprint. When in fact, we know that solar panels are one of the most toxic methodologies for poisoning soil systems in Africa. It's actually illegal to dump solar panels in the United States. And so all of the expired panels that tend to run through their lifespan in 15 to 25 years are being dumped into African landfills and poisoning their waterways with heavy metals and other likes. And so in the end, what we see is we've built this multi-trillion-dollar pseudo economy of carbon offsets and carbon sequestration and carbon credits without any fundamental change in useful behavior. And I think that is a result of the fact that we have failed in the narrative, in that we created a lexicon of understanding global warming in the context of carbon. The irony here is that we live on a planet that lives on carbon. Carbon is fundamentally the fuel of life on this planet, whether you be a bacteria in the soil, an earthworm, a cow in the field, or a human. You only survive for the energetic capacity of carbon. Carbon is literally a battery that can hold energy. And by creating carbon bonds, we can store energy. And so biologically, we do this in things called carbohydrates or fats. Carbohydrates and fats are just long carbon chains of different shapes that then have to be broken down by the small bacteria inside of our cells into CO2. And by breaking a long fatty acid chain or a long carbohydrate in the form of acetyl-CoA or acyl-CoA into CO2, the mitochondria, while respiring CO2, is releasing the energy that had been stored in that carbon matrix. And so to say and see, people like Elon Musk coming along and offering $100 million for the best technology to sequester carbon is literally the equivalent of saying, I want to create a technology that will suck life out of Mother Earth and put it away in a place where we can't reach it. And so the whole narrative, the whole lexicon needs to be solved, because the solution is right beneath our feet. And you guys are the workhorses and the engine for this regenerative machine of solution that sits in front of us. But you've been derailed in your mission. I think what could have been engaged capital to solve the problems of the planet turned into existential, abstract capital that created wealth for industries that had nothing to do with the root cause or the root solution to our problems at hand. And so I wanted to just bring this up tonight so that you guys can start to be part of the Hawaiian effort to change the lexicon of climate change. And we need to fundamentally change our lexicon and narrative around carbon. We need to start seeing carbon as the most precious commodity on Earth. And when we do that and we start valuing carbon for its energy source, rather than seeing it as a toxin, we will change the ways in which we innovate. We'll change our fundamental behaviors around the reason carbon is accumulating in the wrong places of the atmosphere. But without going into too much detail here, I'm going to try to keep this high level. I want to just give a quick run through of how we ended up with this weird carbon paradox story. And the pictures that we often see when talking about the excess carbon look like this. So this is depicting 800,000 years of carbon patterns on the planet, okay? And so the last 100 years being, this final spike here that goes straight vertical for the last 100 years. But you can see that there's a lot of variation over the geologic history of the planet, humans coming in right around here. So for the first 50,000 years of Homo sapiens sapiens, we see a decrease in carbon in the atmosphere. And so I want to point that out simply because Earth has figured out how to do carbon cycling since its origin. And we would not have biology on the planet if we didn't know how to carbon cycle. It's also really fundamental to the Earth to have warming cycles and cooling cycles. It creates ultimately biodiversity. And so I want to make sure that we understand that static levels of carbon has never happened on the planet and probably should never happen. And that's what I fear when we start to innovate towards carbon sequestration. Is I can imagine some government coming along, US being highly likely a candidate for that, come along and say, you know what, we're going to cap global carbon emissions at some 1950s level. And we're going to make sure we suck all the rest of this carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into massive tanks, or we'll pump it down into the massive, caverns that we've put under the ground in the effort to pump natural gas out of the planet with fracking. We'll just fill up all those fracking wells with all this CO2. So we'll invent all these pumps that push all that carbon back down in the earth, and it won't bother us anymore. If we do that, if we start to extract this much carbon from the atmosphere and put it in a sequestered space, we are losing that potential battery, that potential cycling source. So not trying to bust your head on this, but I'm just more just trying to really underline the importance of change in mindset that each of us, even who are engaged in agriculture, need to think differently about carbon. Sequestration would be a disaster for planet Earth. We will accelerate the next sixth extinction that we're in, and if we start taking this. Uh-oh, my power just blinked. Am I still there? Looks like my modem is still on, but
Yes, you're here, Zach. You're here.
All right. I lost my power right before this, and so if it loses, it's going to take me a minute to rejoin by my cell phone, and I won't have slides, but I'll power through the rest of these quickly. Here's a look at kind of a more finite recent history of the planet, and the gray line here is carbon in the atmosphere accumulating. We see these graphs all the time, and my God, we come out with these drastic announcements that we're going up by, every single year there's been another announcement that the most recent records say that we just reached the highest peak carbon levels in the atmosphere in recorded history. And so we do this every year now. So the gray line being that constant rise in carbon. So this makes it look like we're literally drowning in carbon every year worse. Red bars are showing patterns of global warming patterns there by about 1.25 degrees now from the 1950s. And so a drastic change in global temperatures here. The more conservative numbers is that we've maybe gone up by maybe 1 degree Celsius since the advent of the industrial age, so maybe longer than the 70 years that are depicted here. Nonetheless, we get a little bit of trend towards that global warming with this rising carbon. But all of that has been the exact data that has offset our mind or poisoned our mind with the idea that carbon is the poison. And so I want to show a fundamental graph that I think starts to raise questions about where the carbon is coming from and why it's there in the atmosphere. And this is an amazing graph looking not just at the carbon atmospheric level, which is the pink line now rising over time, which is one you kind of just saw going into this kind of near logarithmic type curve here as it goes near asymptotic there. So we've got this rising red line of carbon. The important thing is looking at carbon emissions down here, and the fastest rate of climb in our recorded history over any sort of time was really this kind of 1950s to 1980s range. And yet we only had a very small change in carbon accumulation in the atmosphere through to 1970s here. And so 1970, 1980, we start to see, the 70s to 80s is when we start to see this creeping line that starts to go into this doubling pattern where we see the hockey stick taking off here with the bending of this line. And so it's not until the advent, if you will, of chemical farming that we start to see this inflection point. So we saw a massive rise between World War II and 1970 and relatively small impact on CO2 in the atmosphere. Since then, with the advent of killing the soils, we see an incremental overlay where every single amount of carbon that we add to the atmosphere through emissions shows up in the atmosphere. And so what we're showing here is that we fundamentally lost the respiratory cycle and the ability of carbon to get back in. Now, every bit of carbon we add since then accumulates in the atmosphere to these every year record levels. And so I would argue that we can show over the last century that it wasn't until we fundamentally wiped out the carbon cycle by the denuding of soils throughout the world. We're now at 97% of arable land in the globe considered deteriorated or severely depleted from their carbon levels. And so as we have stopped the respiratory cycle of the planet, every bit of carbon ends up in the atmosphere, whereas before we could add a whole bunch of carbon really quickly and almost none of it ended up in the atmosphere. And so there's this disconnect between emissions and respiration. And so I would say that we should really spend our efforts to solve the crisis of carbon in the atmosphere through improving the respiratory cycle of the planet rather than pouring trillions of dollars to try to offset emissions of 7.8 billion people. Another way of looking at this that I wish got a lot more press, because I think it's so incredible what nature has devised here, is this video here. It's gonna jump around a little bit on me, but I'm gonna try to narrate this for you a little bit as it goes. So we're gonna start in April. So this is kind of before the spring in the Northern Hemisphere. You can see the amount of carbon accumulated in the orange here. Areas of blues and greens down here in the Southern Hemisphere in April, which is the end of the summer cycle down in the Southern Hemisphere, is where carbon is still being breathed in by the planet. And so we've got the Amazon and all of that breathing in carbon down here while we're emitting all this carbon in the Northern Hemisphere. And so this is kind of the picture they would like us to think happens and is just stuck with, and every year we get more and more orange here. But I want to show you that what happens just in a very short period of time here between April and the step forward here. So here again is April. And as we step on the accelerator pedal here, I'm gonna let it cycle for just a second. Should zoom in for us here. Again, Southern Hemisphere in April, breathing in because they're in their summer months, end of their summer season. They've got very active soil systems. So as we wrap up the winter season here in the Northern Hemisphere, you're looking at April and into May, we have massive amounts of carbon production throughout the entire Northern Hemisphere wrapping around. And this is where we're seeing peak levels of coronavirus death. This is where we're seeing peak levels of flu death in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's kind of that February through May. And so that's ameliorated then come the middle of May. So this is middle of May. Here's getting into June.
Hey, Zach, it's not showing the video's not
Here's
working.
July.
Yeah, it's not moving.
And now you're in August of the same year, and you have almost no carbon left in the atmosphere. The frustration that I have is they will only show us this map when they're talking about the importance of carbon sequestration, and they're talking about things like the necessity for, let's see, I got to jump back to my PowerPoint here. There we go. The necessity for, things like your carbon credit economies and things like that. What they're not telling us is that Mother Earth knows how to breathe that carbon in. And it turns out that we've only had about a 0.5% per year increase in the accumulation of carbon per year, meaning that for all that carbon we produce every year, we breathe back in about 98, 99% of it every year, and we leave a little bit of residual in the atmosphere that we fail to breathe in. So there's just a tiny bit of carbon left over at the end of every growing season that has not been respired back into the soil systems, despite the fact that 97% of arable land in the world is severely depleted. And so if we were to refocus our attention on saying, hell, we can fix this problem if we just improve slightly our annual respiratory capacity of the earth, and we can erase this accumulation of carbon, and we can bring it back to a neutral point every fall. And that's what we're capable of doing with a very small change in the atmosphere. When you Google carbon cycle, it is ridiculous what will come up. I really believe this is like the brainwashing of the planet. This university here wanted to show us that the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is from respiration of animals and plants. And so you glance at this and you think, well, it's just too many damn fox and squirrels that are breathing on the planet. Holy crap, if we just killed more fox, we'd probably solve carbon in the atmosphere. I mean, this is literally a textbook on carbon accumulation in the atmosphere, arguing that animals and plant respiration is the primary reason why CO2 is up there. And so it's dismally difficult to drill down to any useful information around carbon cycling. This is one of the most useful things on the internet right now around carbon cycling, and it's horribly out of date. This is like 1996. And it's horribly inaccurate in a number of different areas, but nonetheless, at least it gets at some of the compartments and the sheer capacity they have for carbon cycling. The soil, topsoil alone, 2,300 gigatons of carbon, active carbon potential within that soil level. They're suggesting that only 3 gigatons of total carbon is taken up by the terrestrial system, meaning like your soil systems directly, like the fungi and the like, whereas your plant biomass is absorbing somewhere around 550 gigaton potential with the trees and everything else inspiring this. And so we get a massive amount of inspiratory capacity as we start to see the cycling of agriculture, the cycling of something like an agroforest doing its work here. And if we have a carbon battery here called Mother Earth that can hold 2,300 gigatons, then the 9 gigatons a year that we produce should be a ditzel. If we have active carbon cycling in the soil, this should be absolutely no problem here. And so I don't mean to minimize the toxicity of what we're doing. I'm here to maximize the potential that we could, in very short order, correct the problem. And I'm not the only person saying this, fortunately. This is coming out of Davos with a lot of the scientists there agreeing that this is the current carbon depletion map on the planet. Optimal carbon levels for biologic support are kind of in the 60 to 80 nanograms or parts per million here in the top soil. So this is looking at the top 30 centimeters of soil. Ideally, you're in this kind of green to aqua green level here for biologic diversity. The dark purples are huge carbon sinks. And you can see that everywhere where we grow crops in North America, that's Canada, US, Mexico, through the vast majority of South America, certainly the Sahara and our desert Arab countries and the Near East with India and the like, completely depleted soils all the way through, right? And so Australia, a huge red blob there at nearly no cyclable carbon levels there as an island or as a continent. And so you've got these rims of good-looking soil throughout parts of Asia and New Zealand there, parts of the mountainous areas and parts of the Amazon left here of South America. And then, of course, the big Arctic. And so this Arctic kind of sink here is below ice that's starting to be exposed. And so if you haven't heard that as we start warming the planet and melting these ice caps, we start releasing enormous amounts of carbon from this space here. And so in the end, I think that we have tripped off with our failure of understanding the respiratory cycle of the planet. We have tripped off what could be an irreversible cycle of carbon release from the northern hemisphere as this carbon sink here starts to let go of its carbon reservoir. What this would lead to is some of the most verdant jungles and forest and biodiversity on the planet over the next few million years as the soil systems recover and we start to get biodiversification of the planet following this sixth extinction. Unfortunately, 97% of life on Earth will disappear along with humans, and it will take millions of years from that last extinction. It took about 30 million years before we started to really see life returning with great abundance. And so it takes millions and millions of years for the recovery. But interestingly, it is the release of this massive carbon sink that would allow for something like the massive flora and fauna of the dinosaur era to reoccur. We don't have enough carbon cycling to allow for plants to grow to the full potential that they did in the dinosaur era. The dinosaurs at 55 million years ago, they were eating as herbivores, something like the allosaur, eating only plants, were able to sustain a body that was like 6 to 7 times larger than the biggest elephants that we have today, with a jaw and mouth size that's about the size of a horse. And so the plant density that they were consuming was, exponentially more nutrient dense to allow them to sustain that kind of biologic level of bodily capacity there. And so fascinating to imagine, a planetary vitality as we start to understand carbon cycles better. I would argue that we have the potential with human ingenuity to become co-creators with Mother Earth. Instead of letting the whole extinction process to unfold as it has in the past, we could become a creative force as an agricultural community and team up with the simple agricultural technologies that Vincent was just talking about that are exemplified behind him there. Things like roller crimpers, things like high intensity grazing cycles with multiple species of livestock. You start to get to the potential where we could actually reforest the Sahara, for example. And if we reforested the Sahara alone, which if you read in biblical times was actually a forest, there's descriptions of people walking across northern Africa without ever having to get into the sunshine because the forest canopy was so dense. And so we destroyed the forest canopy over the last few thousand years and desertified northern Africa through longstanding agricultural practices that predated modern man and chemicals. So we've been screwing up this respiratory cycle for a very long time, creating desertification for millennia. And so we have the potential now to reverse desertification, which has been proven again and again, most impressively by Alan Savory, of course, with the Savory Network, which has recovered nearly 1 billion acres globally now of native grasslands. And most of those recovered in deserts of Africa. And so he's proven that with very low technology and very low dollar input, we can start to recover these native grasslands and forest systems. And so with diligent effort, I would argue we could respire the entire carbon problem that we currently have in the atmosphere through a simple reforestation of North Africa. And that would be an exciting single endeavor. In the process, if we then exported those practices to the breadbasket of the Midwest of the United States and then started to decentralize agricultural systems globally to support respiratory cycles, we would not have any problem at all. On that small scale, I like this demonstration here of organic carbon depletion in soil systems. So this is the pre-cultivation level of carbon that's given an arbitrary number of 100 here. And then it shows the cumulative damage done through routine chronic practices of conventional agriculture over the last 100 years. Interestingly, they show the continued decline, which is typical of the plow and till and residue removal that we see throughout the Midwest and in central Maui, for example, being a good example of this, where you see denuded soils all the time. If we stop plowing and allow for the residue to return, we start to do multi-species cover cropping, it gets even better. But even if we just stop the tilling and leave some of the residue, we stop the carbon depletion immediately. If we then will do no-till plus cover crops, or no-till plus cover crops plus additional technologies, which would include things like the roller crimper or high-intensity grazing and the like, we can see a really rapid recovery of those carbon cycles. And that's a really encouraging reality, because we are showing, if this graph is even remotely correct, that over just the course of a few decades, we could recover back to some of those pre-industrial, pre-agricultural cultivation levels of carbon in those soils, which is far beyond what we would need to reverse the problem. Let's see if I have, there's another slide I tried to create, but it looks like I didn't get it in here. One of the interesting things that was found at the Paris and talked about the Paris Accords, but found at Davos by one of the scientific committees there, was that if we improve soil carbon respiration by 0.4% annually, I want to repeat that, 0.4% annually, which is 4 parts per billion there. And so, or 4 parts per thousand is the right way of thinking about it. So 4 parts per thousand of carbon improved, or 0.4% improvement in carbon in the soil annually, we would, within the next 30 years, completely reverse the whole carbon cycle problem. The exciting thing is we don't see an improvement of 0.4% when we start to do these regenerative practices. We see on the orders of 10%, 40%, and even 400% improvements in carbon, active carbon content within those soils over a short period of time, 5-10 years. And so the average soil in the depleted and severely depleted soils globally right now is around 1% soil carbon. We now know, and a lot of it's got a lot of publicity recently with the work of Dave Brown and Alan Williams and these guys. Dave Brown's farm was recently recorded at 12% carbon, and so that's a 1,200-fold improvement, right? Or it's a 1,200% improvement, or 12x improvement in soil carbon over a 15-year period. We only needed 0.4% per year, and he got into this 1,200% kind of range improvements. And so just stunning amounts of carbon are being able to be recycled into the earth. And I always have to catch myself, because I tend to bleed towards that sequestration mindset, but it's not sequestering. That carbon is active, and it's moving right back into the plants that Dave Brown would grow, or is growing behind there in the sun hemp. And then the sun hemp is then being crushed down and providing nutrients for the soil microbes, creating, if you're doing no-till with that, then you're creating a mycelial foundation for the microbial respiratory cycles and all of this. And you start to get into this massive potential where we can start to tap into the true potential of that 2,300 gigaton reservoir of topsoils globally that we're not even utilizing right now at all. So really exciting potential. I'll skip this slide just for running out of time here, and just kind of jump to the concept of farm carbon management. I think many of you are doing these things already, but some simple things: keep soil covered. If you're not using a cover crop that's being crushed down either by high intensity grazing or roller crimper type things, then simply keeping it covered with mulches and the like can help reduce the amount of carbon off gassing from those soils and the decomposition of the mycelial bed during the hot summer months. So keeping the soil covered is critical. You can reduce your soil temperatures radically, which reduces your water demands, which is critical for central Maui, for example. And so huge benefits to the hydrologic cycle, obviously, beyond just the protection of the carbon cycle there. Minimizing decomposition is interesting. Slow decomposition is one of the biggest production causes of methane globally. Right now, sugarcane, which is pertinent to the Hawaiian agricultural scene still, is one of the primary culprits, followed by medicinal and other forms of hemp growing in California and Colorado and Oregon and Kentucky. The hemp cane and the sugar cane do not compost well at all, and they are very slow to decompose, and they off-gas primarily methane over 20, 30 years of decomposition. So that slow decomposition of heavy biomass from crops like sugar cane and hemp are one of our biggest growing causes of methane production, which does not cycle well out of the atmosphere at all, and is about 8 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. And so minimizing decomposition is critical. We need to maximize active soil fermentation and metabolism. So this is active composting, where you're getting turnover of those soil nutrients within days or weeks rather than decades. That's where you get into carbon cycling that's meaningful, because now you're not just off-gassing methane, but you're actually pulling nutrients from the microbial activity and the fungal activities there in the fermentation process. So active fermentation is critical in soil and waste management. The biomass to biochar is a new movement that I'm very excited about. My company's been working for the last 5 years to engineer a new vacuum system that is a improvement on old technologies of pyrolysis, where we can actually convert biomass from hemp, bagasse, which is the sugar cane, banana plants, and rice hulls are a big deal in most tropical climates, especially South Asia, that are a problem. Those tend to all off-gas methane when decomposting slowly, and most of those countries, including the state of Hawaii, actually ends up burning most of their biomass, which turns into carbon particulate, which then complicates our respiratory season and our human health as a result. And so instead of turning that into fine carbon particulate in the atmosphere through burning it, we should be turning that back into biochar and biodiesel. And so the machines are now in full-scale production in Colorado as of this month. My company is called Resource Dynamics that is working on that. And we've got some exciting partners in the hemp industry. And we've already sat down with a couple of the state legislators here in Hawaii on both sides of the aisle that are excited to put their office names behind the regulatory approvals of these units for Hawaii to start to put biomass, and ultimately also our plastics and the like, into biodiesel for the island. It turns out one of the main chemical inputs, well, the biggest chemical input into the agricultural system is not actually herbicides, which I speak about all the time, it's actually diesel. And so the opportunity to turn our biomass into biodiesel, into a breathable CO2 in the atmosphere, ultimately, is an interesting take on reducing methane and improving carbon cycling. And so those machines will be up and running over the course of this year. And we hope to have some of those running in Hawaii within the next couple of years. So it'll be exciting to see how we can help you guys start to offset your biomass issues here in this tropical climate. Biodiversification, of course, is one of the keys to success anywhere. Minimizing tilling to maximize that mycelial activity is the beginning of that process. 7 or more species is critical in your cover crops. One species cover cropping can really limit the speed of recovery of soil systems and carbon cycling. And so, Vincent, I hope you're very successful in getting your cover crop seed company off the ground, and I encourage as many species as possible in those mixes. The mixes that are being used by many of the Midwest farmers are not the ones that are going to work here. Obviously, different ecosystems, different solutions needed here, but the ones that are really having success are up in the 15 to 30 species mixes, where you've got multiple species of vetch and clovers and all of that within the mix, and that's how they're really reaching these extreme peak levels of carbon cycling in the soil systems, biodiversity at the cover crop level. Crop diversity then in the food production, critical, and animal integration is widely seen as one of the potential solutions, but I'm a huge fan of agroforestry and ultimately of the use of the roller crimpers that Vincent mentioned earlier as alternatives to the animal integration. I think we achieve the same biodiversification through agroforestry that we do with animal intensive things. So it doesn't really matter where your biodiversity is. Is it in the plant life? or is it in the animal life? Either direction, you're going to reach biodiversities in the soils and improve carbon cycling. Beyond just carbon management, though, one of my main points of bringing all this up with all of you tonight is so that you guys can be part of the change in lexicon and narrative on carbon in the Hawaiian Islands here. I want our legislators to start thinking with us in regards to carbon as an asset instead of carbon as a poison. We want to start thinking about how we have a root cause solution beneath our feet in our soil systems, and we don't need sequestration, but we need respiration. And to do that, we need soils that are left intact, untouched by herbicides and pesticides, untouched by the tillage, and we really need to start to see a world that can breathe again. Carbon sequestration destroys life potential on Earth, period. I want you guys to really that to sink in. We need carbon cycling as the accelerator pedal on life. If we cycle it, it's going to create and support more biodiversity and adaptation on the planet. The concept of carbon offset needs to move to carbon respiration. The concept of carbon credits needs to move to engaged regenerative capital. This whole carbon credits thing is a bunch of BS. It's allowing companies to keep doing what they've been doing, to keep toxifying the consumer product industry. We need to stop with the carbon credit belief system, and we need to demand engaged capital. Nestle, Dow, ExxonMobil, these companies need to start investing directly in agricultural regenerative systems. If they don't, we are not going to reach any sort of a real economy around carbon, and we're going to continue to fail to see it as the most important asset for Mother Earth. We need to change the supply chain demands of CPG companies. We need to decentralize the agricultural system at large, and we need ultimately to support all of you in your larger mission to go about what you do so well every week. And I just want to applaud each of you as members of the HFUU community and ultimately of the global agricultural community as real champions for bringing back these systems of indigenous wisdom that lies within each of us. One of the great thinkers on wisdom recently pointed out that we are all indigenous, and there is nobody that does not come from indigenous roots on the planet. We are an indigenous species if we choose to think so, and if we choose to open our mind to those original wisdoms that programmed us. So that's the content I wanted to share. It looks like I'm about to drop a battery here too, but Vincent, thank you for the opportunity to be with your community again. Paul, thank you for the music. You light my life all the time with that. I love your talent, and you inspire all of us with Yo Garden, and Jen and I and our friends have so enjoyed being a part of your volunteer community on Thursdays. You guys inspire us. We are so excited for your baby on the way. We need a new generation of carbon champions on the planet, and we see that baby on the way as one of those superstars. I can't wait to see that one come forward.
Hello, buddy.
Yeah, baby. Well, Zach, thank you so much, especially for the getting sequestration out of the lexicon of the communication. I'm guilty of that. You know, I'm always telling people I want to sequester the carbon in the soil, but it really, truly, it's about recycling and the respiration of the earth in that spirit, because that's where the roots come from. You know, that's where all the humic development comes from, that really holds that carbon in a way that it can respire and go through its cycle of returning back to the earth. So yeah, thank you for that articulation, Zach. You've always been a great assistance in that spirit. It's just like instead of regenerative, you know, calling things degenerative, you know, having things generate life and have us create this generative system. So I love it and appreciate, and that's why we bring you back, Zach, to tune us in, you know, get that fine tuning, and we'll keep moving this whole thing forward in collaborative, cooperative working together. So thank you, brother.
All right. I appreciate all of you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
And, you know, I wanted to, Vince, if you could put the slide up on our membership, because there's a lady here tonight with us. Her name is Katie Zuber. She lives in Hana. And Katie, can you wave to everybody, please?
Hello,
Yeah.
hi.
All right. And Katie is our membership director, our new membership director, coordinator, however. She's taken it on to where she's going to be in touch with our chapter presidents and our members who are out there and just keeping people informed about what's going on with the whole HFUU. There's Katie. Hi, Katie. Aloha.
Hello.
And Katie's a new mom too. And so it's really great that she's able to work from home and support our organization in this respect. So Please, when you hear from Katie, give her the warm smile and that she so exudes herself. And welcome aboard, Katie. Happy you're working with us.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor. I'm very, very excited. Thank you to everyone.
Right on, dear. And so we're going to close out with some music. Oh, there's a slide for our membership. You know, folks, go to hfuu.org. There's a lot of content up there. All of our former speaker series is up there online. And you know, check out our website. You know, membership's very affordable. We have a lot of great discounts to benefit from. And it's just a great way to make our voice louder at legislature for all these initiatives that we're working on. So mahalo nui for those that are members, existing members, and those that can, please continue to support our organization. So with that, in that spirit, Paul Izak, Brother Paul, please take us out and by taking us into your music.
Right on. Mahalo, mahalo, friends, for being here and supporting one another. Mahalo to Zach so much. Really appreciate how you articulated all of that, and it just makes me feel really passionate to be a regenerative farmer in this time and to support regenerative farming. And our farm has been just, you know, really great to see the community grow, see what's possible. Like it can feel like kind of overwhelming at times, but at the same time, it is an exciting time to be a farmer and to see community gather together because of what is possible with the remediation. So I wrote a song this year called Year of the Farmer 2021. It's still finding its roots. I'm still, you know, getting vocals on it, but I feel like this is an empowering chant song, and that's kind of what I felt from Zach's talk, was like, we got this. This is the year to help start making some changes. But let's say that every year, I think, as we move forward. But here we go, Year of the Farmer. In a time when this world's in crisis, we may ask ourselves, what can I do? We all need food to survive. So if you wanna stay alive, you got to give rise to the ones who feed our communities. I'm talking about your farmers, regenerative farmers, aloha aina farmers, yeah, the mahi'ai. So we say that we've got to work together, honoring the strength of our ancestors. We've got to work together, yes, this is the year of the farmer, yes it is. This is the year of the farmer. Oh boy, this is the year of the farmer. Yes, our friends got to show support for your local farmer. Huli and Hai, planting for this generation. Huli and Hai, planting for a sovereign nation. Huli and Hai, we're planting for this generation. This is the year of the farmer. This is the year of the farmer, yes sir. This is the year of the farmer. We got to show support for your local farmers. Got to show support for your local farmers. This is a revolution, we have come with solutions. Yes, in this time of need, yes, we have come to feed the nation. It's time to motivate so everyone can grow their food. Yes, it's the mahi'ai, we're here to set the mood. So much to come our way. So plant your seeds, yes, plant them day by day. Get it back to the roots and culture, sing that we are all indigenous people. Let it bring your farmers. Your ancestors were farmers. We can all be farmers, yeah. A mahi'ai. we say that we've got to work together, honoring the strength of our ancestors. We've got to work together, yes, sir. This is the year of the farmer, yes it is now. This is the year of the farmer, whoa, whoa. This is the year of the farmer, and we've got to show support for our local farmers, yeah. Huli and High, planting for this generation, Huli and High, planting for the sovereign nation, Huli and High. We're planting for a generation, got to show support for your local farmer. You got to show support for your local farmer. You got to show support for your local farmer, yeah. Got to show the support. Yes, it's amazing what all that energy in this past year has brought forth. I think for this year is what I've seen in the community that I've been surrounded with, and what I feel from the HFU community is this motivation to move forward. And I know it can be easy and the problems sometimes, but to use that as the compost to move us forward. And I've been really appreciating more of that mindset, and incorporating that. So I wanted to play this song called Back to the Roots, as we're talking about, you know, that soil breathing again. I mean, it's really deep in the roots, and that regeneration. So this is a song I wrote years ago, and it's the remembrance within us as well. So as I was writing it, I was thinking about Mama Earth and getting back to the roots and culture, but at the same time getting back to our mindset and our consciousness of being in that frame of mind. So that's where this song came from. Oh, a little thunder in the background right there. There it is. With truth being understanding of where we've been and where we're going. Yeah, from the roots we will set our foundation, yeah. Land of which we stand upon, 'cause everyone has the right to live free, and everyone has the right to live peacefully. Yes, everyone has the right to live free, and everyone has the right to live peacefully. So come and stand for what you believe in. You come and stand for what you believe in. Come and stand for what you believe in. Set your foundation. Set your foundation, yeah. You're from the roots on up, yeah. You're from the roots on up. You're from the roots on up, we sing, yeah. You're from the roots on up, no matter color or your religion. No matter color or your religion. No matter color or your religion. It's a new beginning. It's a new beginning. Yes, I believe in sunrise. Yes, I believe in sunset. Yes, I do. I believe in sunrise. And I believe in sunset. Yes, I believe in never forgetting in where we have come from. I know we must stand strong. A new day is calling. New day is calling. New cries are calling. New cries are calling. New day is dawning. New day is dawning. New cries are calling, calling, calling. To come and stand for what you believe in. You come and stand for what you believe in. Come and stand for what you believe in and set that foundation, yeah. And set your foundation, yeah. 'Cause I know all of us have been told certain things, yeah. All of which it has a price and it can bring you faith or destruction. Bring you faith or destruction. So take that weight off your shoulders. Take that weight off your shoulder. Take that weight off your shoulder. Take that weight off your shoulders and take us back to the roots so we can grow again, yeah. Back to the roots so we can look within. Back to the roots so we can all begin to understand once again, yes, understand once again. Back to the roots, yes, yeah. Back to the roots, building.
Looks like Paul got the weather took over his getting back to the roots, but appreciated his last song there and all his music tonight. It was really great. I appreciate everybody for hanging in there. You know, it was really a wonderful presentation by both Dr. Zach Bush and Paul's music tonight. Thank you everybody for being on. I wanted to encourage you all to go hear Zach's webinar. Zach, that's up online. Is that on your website?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
It's an amazing webinar. What a gift to the community, and you'll be enriched by going there and checking it out. I was truly enriched by listening in that day, and so thank you everybody. In 2 weeks we'll have our next speaker series. You'll be hearing about who's going to be presenting and playing music soon. So again, you folks, everybody out there, stay positive and test negative throughout this process. Remember, this is an ongoing pandemic, like Zach said, every year, you know, every year. So don't get duped into thinking that all of a sudden you got to be paranoid about living. Keep your immune system strong. I've ordered my immune supplements from Dr. Bush. I love what you're doing with that, Zach, and building the microbiome of people's guts, because that's where 80% of our immune system lies. And I've gotten Paul Stamets immune defense too, so I'm well equipped and couldn't be healthier. So please take care of yourselves, everybody out there. Take care of your families, and mahalo nui. Thank you for being here tonight. Aloha. Send a shout out to my wife Irene and Kahanulani. Thank you for keeping our farm feeding the community. Love working with you ladies each day. Aloha.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you, Vincent Kimura. We rocked another one, brother.
Thanks everyone for joining. Hey, Paul, I see you're back.
Oh, there he is. He came back. All right, Paul. Back to the roots. All the best, Paul. Thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Paul.
Aloha.
Thanks, everyone.